Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know what time of day it is that you're watching this, but I'm so glad that you joined us. Today is an amazing day. It's an amazing evening. We're having a phenomenal conversation today with me, Terrence Jones, and also the very own Dr. Glenn. Let's give a round of applause for this audience that we have here. And today is going to be so dope. I can't think of another way to frame it because we're going to be doing something that is so necessary. And it stems from the Disruptive Thinking workshop that we have coming up on the 22nd of February that you will be able to stream via YouTube and on our Peirce channels. But in the meantime, there was so much rich conversation that emerged when we started to create that content that we thought, hey, it would be so awesome if we expanded this out and focused specifically on relationship dynamics. I'm going to say that again for you. Relationship dynamics. So before I go too far into it, I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Glenn, and kind of just want you to tell us a little bit about you, the work that you do here at Peirce College, and we're going to have some fun with this conversation today.
Good. Oh, well, thank you, Terrence. I am Dr. Charlene Glenn. I've worked for the college for over 22 years. It has just been an amazing experience to support our students here at Peirce College. One of the things that I'm passionate about is student development, student programming, and it really set the stage for me to develop the Level Up series. During the pandemic, I was just trying to think about how could we support our students and still connect with them. And I came up with this idea of the Level Up series, and to do it all via Zoom to provide them with professional development opportunities, skill building, and it just really took off.
Nice.
So I am excited that I've been able to partner with you now. We have partnered on at least one or two workshops. And this disruptive thinking workshop was one that we said, okay, we could really develop some great content around. We are going to be using some of the concepts from the book that Pastor T.D. Jakes has written called Disruptive Thinking. And I think that our audience is really going to enjoy the topic around relationship dynamics and what disruption means when it comes to relationships. Yeah. And so I look forward to this dialogue that we're going to have.
Nice. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really rich exchange today. From this Center of Male Engagement, I definitely want to share that we build and frame everything around DEI and B, holistic framework. Really looking to see how students can thrive holistically and benefit from all the different aspects of who they are, not just one particular lane. And I think that ties in to the heart of where the Level Up series really starts, which makes this such an organic connection because you thought, how do I connect this amazing content to students in the midst of a crisis?
Yes.
And even though there are certain frameworks we were already using, you went outside of the norm, outside of the box to, try something different. And it's been such a great tool to get content to our students. And that's kind of why we're standing on the foundation that you set, the precedent that you set to be innovative using a platform now of a podcast. What are your thoughts about that?
This is an exciting opportunity for us to reach our adult learners and to reach them in a different way other than, teaching, other than workshops. It's another way for individuals to learn about Peirce College, to learn about the various offerings that we offer our students in terms of support services, activities, events. And if anything, it makes our activities even more robust.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Does.
I'm excited. I don't know about you.
Okay. So we're ready. We're ready to jump in and talk about these relationship dynamics.
Watch out now. Okay, so let's start off right here. So I know that we have a lot of information, but I think it's necessary to kind of start off with just what disruptive thinking is from the author's perspective. Would you mind opening us up with that?
Sure, yeah. I'll do that. So it's interesting how T.D. Jakes shares a lot of stories about the trauma and a lot of the experiences that he encountered as a child. And so, really, what he is focusing on is how individuals will be thrown a curveball, will be thrown into some really challenging situation. And in order to get out of it and to think to themselves, how do I, get out of this situation? It really makes you become a disruptive thinker. You've got to think about how to get out of this tough situation and to come up with an outcome that's going to be favorable.
Yeah.
So he is the type of person that says, hey, normalcy does not occur all the time, and that we all are going to be thrown curveballs and challenges in our lives. But can we, again, think outside the box and come up with the best possible outcome? And if you're able to do that, you're somebody who's disruptive and can touch a lot of different lives, your job, your families. It can really touch a lot of folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that definition and perspective on disruptive thinking, because I've never really even seen those two words put together prior to this book. I know what it means to be disruptive. And I know what it is to be a thinker. And oftentimes disruption is often looked at from like this negative perspective, right? Like if you're a disruption, you need to be stopped from being a disruptor, right? But this is like a paradigm shift of looking at disruption from a positive perspective.
Yes.
And I'm really interested in like your thoughts as it relates to like just reframing our minds around being a disruptor. Before we even get into the relational impact of this, of course, this reaches so many different areas, like to the point that you mentioned earlier, from the author, speaking about profession, speaking about family, speaking about self. Before you get to relationships, there's so many other areas, but how do we reframe our thinking around just the word disruption to a positive perspective?
I'd have to say that it really involves a paradigm shift in your thinking. You just can't take the word disruptive and think about it from a negative point of view.
Yeah.
You've got to say to yourself, guess what? Disruptive may have been used that way, but it also could be used another way.
Yeah.
And it also could be used from the standpoint of coming up with something creative, coming up with something that's transformational, coming up with something that can really make an impact in everyone's lives. We see it a lot in business when many organizations are talking about the disruption that's going on in tech, the disruption that's going on now with AI. And so I think that everyone needs to look at it from a different lens and really adopt a paradigm shift in their thinking, that disruption is not negative, and that disruption is a positive thing that really can go a long way and really push us to the limits of creativity, push us to the limits of coming up with something that is just transformational.
I think it really sets the tone for us going into the relationship talk, right? Because when we think about who we are as individuals, oftentimes our relational approach, if we're honest, is often rooted in our past experiences, which aren't always healthy, which weren't always positive, which, if we're honest, sometimes could have been filled with trauma in different ways, right? And a lot of times we'll redefine ourselves through the lens of the trauma and say, hey, I don't take no stuff from nobody, right? Nobody's going to tell me what to do. You may take me on a date, but you're not going to do blank, 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 right? Like we create these rules of engagement that whoever we meet has to live by, essentially, relationally, and it has nothing to do with them, but it has everything to do with what we've experienced before. And oftentimes we'll find that we're the contributor that makes the new relationship toxic sometimes, right? Because we're bringing the baggage of old spaces to the new space, expecting something to be new, right? That's a little heavy right there, right? I'm gonna let it simmer for a second.
That is a lot, but one of the things to address that point that I could take away from it is that we learn a lot about ourselves in relationships.
Indeed.
So we do learn that boy, I'm bringing that past trauma to this relationship and I shouldn't be. I probably should not be putting that label on that particular person because it's not fitting. And so I would venture to say that we learn a lot about ourselves. And if we're honest with ourselves and being authentic, we've got to be open to change. And we've got to try very hard to leave that baggage behind us, as hard as it may be, because what we're doing is we're sabotaging the relationship before it begins. We are sabotaging it before it begins.
Wow.
And we don't want to do that.
Right.
And so we've got to be authentic and into these relationships with a clean slate. But it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I'm going to stick with the C's of challenge and open up one of the biggest challenges in relationships, which is communication. Communication. That's a big C
It is.
in relational dynamics, right? So when we think of being a disruptive thinker, through communication, what comes to mind for you?
What comes to mind for me is, believe it or not, the first thing comes to me is listening. We can communicate all we want, but we've got to be able to listen to the other person to be able to communicate effectively. I think we're always busy just talking, but not listening. And if we listen and become active listeners, I believe that our communication is a lot better.
I think you should say that again for the people in the back.
That we will definitely learn how to improve our communication if we are active listeners. Because a lot of times we're doing too much talking and we're not listening.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And active listening is so key, right? Because there's some folks, and I know we've all heard this before. There's a difference between listening and just waiting to speak.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when you're actively listening, you're trying to find the heart of the other person before you have something to say.
Yes.
And I think oftentimes we are quick to get into debates. We are quick to fight for a cause. And the hardest thing I could imagine is being in a relationship, because we're talking about different types of relationships.
Yes.
But any relationship has some type of value or some type of outcome that we would prefer.
Yes.
And I can't imagine being in turmoil with someone who I'm in any type of relationship with. It could be work relationship, it could be romantic relationship, it could be a friendship, it could be a neighbor. Like, it's never fun to be in an active, tense, a volatile situation. And oftentimes the simplest active listening can defuse a long time of problems where you can even sometimes go backwards and say, I don't even know why we have a bad relationship, but we just do.
Yes.
And I think sometimes it's like that's a byproduct of not being an active listener and not even looking to be an effective communicator over time.
Yes. Yes. And you know what that's speaking to? What it's speaking to is we're bringing some preconceived notions to the relationship. We're bringing in, again, our baggage. We're bringing in, there's something about this person I might not like, and it really is just turning us off from really being an active listener and communicating.
Yeah.
And so we've got to really take stock in what baggage, again, are we bringing to the conversation? Again, this trauma, this baggage, it still always rears its head when it comes to communicating and just relationships in general.
Yeah, and that prompted a thought for me that I want to throw out there. And there's this phrase that is more contemporary now, but it's called main character energy. Have you heard that before?
No, please share that with me.
All right. Yes, I'll put you on real quick.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So main character energy is when someone shows up to a space and it's all about them. Right. So they could go to a restaurant and it's like everybody needs to be looking at me. Or if I show up and I'm in a conversation, I may not have anything to say, but I'm going to make sure I'm heard and I'm seen because I'm the main character always. Everybody else, they're supporting characters. I'm the main character.
Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of main character energy that's brought into conversations because a lot of times, to the point that you just made about baggage, when you show up with baggage,
Yes.
it's almost like you become a playwright where you have an expectation of how people are supposed to respond,
Yes.
what folks are going to say. And if they didn't say their line the way that you expected them to, then that's a problem. So now we're in conflict because you didn't do what I expected you to do, or what I
Yes.
wanted you to do, or what I
Yes.
preferred for you to do. But at the center of all of that is not the collaboration of two folks or three folks or whoever. It's you.
Yes.
It's you and what you prefer, what you want, and how fair is that, right?
That is not fair, and that really is going to kill really a good relationship. It's going to kill a good relationship because a relationship takes two people. It's a partnership. It is a byproduct of two individuals really sharing themselves and being authentic and genuine with one another. And if someone's going to enter a relationship thinking that they're the main character, they're missing out. They're really missing out on really getting to know and understand that other person. And they're not really giving the relationship a chance.
Yeah.
Because they're just saying, it's all about me. You really don't matter. It really is all about me. And I don't believe that healthy relationships can function that way.
Wow. And it's like what you just did was you gave a voice to an action that I don't think most people actually have tried to listen for before, right? Like, to say that that action says you don't matter, that hit. But a lot of times we have a lot of actions that are saying that same thing.
Yes.
And the unfortunate thing is, as unfair as it might be, it may be your learned response because someone gave you actions that showed you that you didn't care, and we want to kind of reverse that, right? We want to reverse that. We want to neutralize that as much as possible. And if this could just be a moment where I affirm to everyone that's listening right now, it doesn't matter what you've experienced. It doesn't matter who told you that you didn't matter. It doesn't matter who told you that you wouldn't be anything, or that you're too ugly, you're too big, you're too black, you're too white. Whatever it is that anyone has ever told you, it's not true. At the core of you is value. At the core of you is purpose. And this is why you're sitting here listening to this conversation, to find out, how can I leverage purpose in a better and more applicable way? I felt that.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, that was good.
That meant a lot to me when I thought about that value. That value really did hit home for me. When I think about a lot of different relationships that I've been involved in, and I just thought about that value.
Yeah.
Value is a powerful thing.
Indeed. That's real. And I'm thinking even of disruptive thinking and applying it to effective communication. And even thinking from a tips perspective, that active listening, I think, is very key.
Yes.
That understanding your value and the value of others is very key. But before you can accept the value of others, you have to understand the value that you hold, right?
Yes.
And it's not from a narcissistic view. It's from a holistic health perspective, right?
Yes.
But I also even want to think about communication from a journey. And thinking about communication as a journey to discover with someone. Because I think a lot of times we aren't fully present in life. And we almost can be, I don't know if you remember that movie, The Truman Show. You ever seen it? It's a Jim Carrey movie. It's a classic.
I'm
gonna have to.
I don't remember it.
Yeah, it's a classic. Like I'll say it's probably old enough that they probably still have DVDs out there.
Okay.
Of The Truman Show. I don't think they had a VHS. I think it came after VHS. But
gotta see it then.
yeah. So it's a movie where Jim Carrey was the only person who didn't know that everybody else around him were actors. And he was living life, but everybody around him was kind of just playing a role.
Yes.
And what happens is he begins to discover that the world around him wasn't real.
Yes.
So he starts challenging the norms that were around him. And as he starts challenging the norms, the people who were acting started to fall out of character because they didn't know how to act outside of the role that they were playing.
Yes.
And I think that that's kind of what happens in our real lives, is that we kind of get stuck in a role and we end up treating other folks as if all we are role players versus actually experiencing the fullness of what life can cause to emerge within us, where you're able to learn from anybody. You're able to learn from any experience. You're able to be corrected. Like sometimes it's funny. I have two small children, and the oldest is 6, the youngest is 5. And there was an occasion, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, where I had said something that I wanted him to do, and I thought he didn't do it. And I was like, you didn't, his name is Thaddeus, the oldest. And I said, Thaddeus, you didn't do what I asked you to do. He said, but I did, Dad. I said, nah, you didn't do it. And I just kind of walked away because I thought that he didn't do it.
Right.
Come later on, I looked and I was like, oh, he did do it. I just was looking in the wrong spot for whatever it was. I'm not gonna get all into the, the minutia of the situation, right? But he did do what he said that he did. And I had to go back to him and say, you know what that is? I said, I apologize. I was absolutely wrong and you were right. And I said, do you accept Daddy's apology? And he said, yeah, Dad, it's okay. And it was like so necessary, but me and my 39-year-old self had to apologize to my 6-year-old son, and he showed me something in that moment that I was willing to learn from. And I think sometimes we kind of create these boundaries where I'm not going to receive from you for whatever reason. I'm not going to hear from you for whatever reason, and we'll be strong and wrong.
we don't want to be strong or wrong. We've got to be humble. I believe that in relationships, you have to be humble, you have to be flexible, and there is something to learn from everyone. And I think going into the relationship with humility, to me, goes a long way, as well as being flexible and understanding that the other person, across from you has a point of view. They have ideas that matter. And if you're going to engage in a relationship with them, whether it's work, personal, you got to be willing to listen. You got to be able to see their point of view with no judgment, but be able to do that. And I think that sets the foundation for a good relationship.
I agree. And we have some strong C's so far. The last one, communication, that was the second one. I think we should transition a little bit and now talk about change. What do you think?
Okay, change. I know. No one likes to change. I just recently moved, and boy, oh boy, what a process it was packing up all of these things that I didn't even realize that I had. And I'll tell you, spending somewhere 6 years and then having to move, oh boy, that change really hit me hard. It did. So yes, this whole idea of change is something that we all had to deal with in many ways. Now, when you think about relationships, and I was thinking about this question, before coming on to the podcast, and I started thinking about mindsets. And I think mindsets can really influence how we deal with change. And I had to refer back to Dr. Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset and fixed mindset. And I think if you look at those two areas, they really speak to whether people can adopt to change or not, whether they can deal with challenges or not. Someone who has the growth mindset can deal with change, can deal with challenges, always see the possibilities. But someone with a fixed mindset is someone who really has a difficult time with change, has a difficult time with, dealing with challenges. It's easy to give up. So that's something that I'd like us to consider, thinking about mindsets. Mindsets is the key to me in terms of dealing with change, and can people adapt?
I agree with that 1,000%. Your mindset is where all of your actions come from, and it sets your perspective to either being satisfied or being frustrated, right? Like, there's a difference when you're moving and you know that there's a better space for you. Versus when you don't know where you're going, right? And the perspective can be, or just the fact that there's a lot of work to do, right? Like, all this work is absolutely too much. But because I know there's somewhere better for me, this is just a part of the process, right? When we speak about relationships, I think so often we have this perspective, and I've heard this. I don't know how I haven't done any empirical survey or data, right?
Okay.
But I'm gonna take it because we are in Valentine's Day season and make it,
Yes.
the eros side of relationship,
Yes.
where I've heard that men look for their partners to stay the same, and women look for their partners to change. I've heard this. You can push back on it, like I'll put it like this: the woman is looking for the potential in their partner,
Yes.
and the man is looking for the consistency of their partner.
You know?
What are your thoughts? Now, once again, this isn't my thoughts. This is just something that I've heard out there, kind of like the men are from Mars, women from Venus, kind of a thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that.
We can debunk it. We could.
No, I sort of agree with it in
Okay.
many ways.
Okay.
And I do believe that when you enter in relationships, I do believe that men are looking for consistency. I do believe that they are looking for consistency. And if I were to maybe, put myself in the mix of this, I think most women are looking for men to have potential and that they're going to grow and that they're going to change. And I think that's what creates the conflict, unfortunately. I didn't want to use this word conflict, but it presents the conflict in relationships when you both are on these two planes.
Yeah.
And you got to meet in the middle somewhere. You got to meet in the middle. And this is where, again, we got to go back to communication is key. And before you enter in certain relationships, you need to have some discussion about what are your future plans? What are some of the things that are important to you? What are you looking for, in a partner? You've got to have some of that conversation and dialogue to get at, is this person looking for someone to be the same? And are you really looking for someone to grow and grow with you? Because I hear a lot of times, and again, that marriages don't work because somebody else is growing and somebody else is stagnant. And if I were to, think about many of the folks that I know, that probably was one of the situations that caused their relationship or marriage not to work because someone was stagnant and the other person was growing. So I think there could be some truth to that statement.
Yeah.
There could be.
Yeah, it could. And I'm gonna rest on the could, right? Because we can't make it a concrete because we still don't have empirical data.
We
right?
don't.
We have general perspective, just talking
Exactly.
generally on this subject. But I definitely agree with the things that you shared, and even going back to the concept of communication early on.
Yes.
One of the things that I believe is problematic is that communication doesn't always, another C word, continue. Like you speak to it on the beginning as if it's like a contract. Like, will you do this, this, and this? And then it's like, well, I talked to you 8 years ago and you said you would do and you have not done. Well, there needs to be a lot of other conversations that are happening because to your point, people do evolve. People do change. The only constant is change, right? So the things that I needed at one point in time may change over time. The things that I'm focused on. Let's say if you have professional goals, one of the biggest detractors from many relationships nowadays is actually not making your goals, but actually making your goals. Because then once you've hit it, the way that life engages sometimes changes. If you get a really great job that pays you phenomenally, oftentimes it's going to require a lot more of your time. What does that look like when you're not as available for social things because you're at work at the dream job? Or what does it look like when you say, hey, I'm going to go back to school and now my family, they're excited, they're cheering me on, but now I have to study and the kids still have to eat and I still have to work a full-time job. But I'm also getting this degree that's going to help me in the future. And there's a spouse that's supporting all of this or is a bystander or is a co-contributor in all of this, right? How do we navigate these things? Communication, right? And communication it can't be contractual. Communication has to be one where it evolves and it allows you to see the heart of what the other person needs and what can I do to support you and you're looking at what can you do to support me so that we're both covered.
Yes.
That's another C, covered. We're heavy on the C's today.
We are. I totally agree with you. And I do believe that communication is an ongoing process. And sometimes it might be those difficult conversations that we have to have, but we have to have them.
Yeah.
And if the ultimate goal of whatever, whether it is going back to school, whether it's the promotion, it is necessary to still have that conversation. To say, okay, here's what our plan is. Here's what I'm looking to do. What do you think about it? How could you support me? And what do I need to support you?
Yeah.
So before we engage in particular activities, a conversation needs to happen.
And I think the beauty of that, or one of the beautiful things that comes out of that, is a relationship that's been cultivated by the people who are present in the relationship.
Yes.
I think a lot of people nowadays, because we're in this I don't like this term, but I'm going to use it.
What is the term?
I don't like this term. And I promise I probably won't ever use it again just because it's making me mad that it's coming up for me.
Okay.
Microwave generation.
Okay.
I feel like that's like a term I shouldn't be using. But either way, everything comes so quick.
Yes.
Everything that you want is at your fingertips on your phone. You have Instagram, you have Facebook, you have these things where you can follow folks that look like the type of person. You could literally be watching a relationship or watching a person virtually in social media world and impose the description, the lifestyle, the way that they present themselves online onto a person that's in your real life. And I think that makes it difficult because it makes you almost feel as if I'm supposed to have what I see right next to me when you didn't build that together yet. You can't say I have a 7-figure business if you didn't build a 6-figure business. If you haven't built any business, it's not just, and I think a lot of times we'll say in relationship, that I want you to be a certain kind of a way. And then you'll look for folks who already are that kind of way, but they weren't cultivated with you.
Yes.
They got that way through a life that was either self-sustained or through someone else. When there's someone right next to you, there's a phrase that we've all heard before. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. You can go over there and see all these benefits, but there's that 30 to 40% that doesn't really connect for you in terms of values that are not the same. Yeah. On paper, you can check off all these lists, but they really don't care about you, or they have these ways about their lifestyle that don't really coincide with your flows. Right. What would happen if you developed with someone and actually stuck through the hard times, the tough times? What would emerge from that, and what type of value would you have in even being able to see the other person succeed because of your contributions to them, and they're doing the same for you?
I really do believe that is what T.D. Jakes is getting at in his book when he's talking about being married to a disruptor. And he's talking about how two individuals who work together, who show up in an authentic manner, who work together on their goals, who support one another, can really build a phenomenal life together. But it's going to be definitely some challenges along the way.
Yeah.
There's going to be some conflict. But if, again, the two can meet, communicate, can meet in the middle somewhere, because, again, you're not always going to agree.
Yeah.
But if the two of you are committed to a union that is going to thrive and have some long-term, longevity, that to me is where some good disruption can take place.
Yeah.
For you to achieve that goal of a degree, a business, whatever you choose.
Right.
Whatever you choose to do.
And I like the fluid practicality of this conversation, because we can talk about the big things like starting a business, getting a new job, but some of the most pervasive conversations come from the small things. It's not always the big things. Sometimes it's the small things. And when I think of the small things, I think of just my experience of trying to find ways to support my spouse,
Yes.
who has she's a nurse by trade, and through the pandemic, it was incredibly demanding
Yes.
because when folks were getting stuck home, she never stopped. You know, first responders never stopped. They always still had to show up. They had to wear three different types of masks. Most times the equipment was under par, but they had to do like all of these different measures to make sure they protected themselves.
Yes.
And it was very demanding, right? So her normal shifts demanded more from her emotionally, mentally, physically than it would during a normal time. And speaking of communication, so I'm telling my business, but it's all right, right? One of the things that I had shared before we had got married was that I do clean clothes, but I don't fold clothes. Don't judge me. Don't judge me, anybody. All right. I was being honest. I said, listen, as a part of this union, you know, I'm looking forward to, you know, what is your perspective on this? Oh, I fold clothes. This is what she said. Now I'm talking for her. She's not here, but she said this. She said, I fold clothes. That's no problem. That's good. You know, at least you're cleaning them. I'll be able to fold them. It's all good. So we're in the pandemic now, right? And I'm home. I'm working from home. So I'm able to wash all the clothes, right? Because I'm home all day long versus being home for only a few hours after work before going to sleep.
Yes.
So there's this large pile of clothes that have been washed, that have been dried, but they're just piling up. And then one day she says, there's just too many clothes around here. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't tell her this, but I said, you said that you was going to be folding these clothes, right? And this was, of course, years prior. This wasn't like yesterday. We didn't just get married. We have been married for now 8 years. But at the time, it was still maybe about 3 or 4 years in or so. And I'm like, yeah, this is her responsibility. She does her job. I do my job. And this is just how it works. But essentially, I saw where every time that she came in, she was speaking about these clothes. And I said, well, she's doing a lot for people. Like I really was like just recognizing how much she's giving. She's a mother. She's a labor and delivery nurse. So she's helping mothers bring their babies in. So it's literally a fight, right? And you're doing all this with like so much protection on these women coming in, and some have COVID, some don't. Imagine someone blowing in your face because they're giving birth to a baby, and all types of fluids and stuff is everywhere, as you can imagine. And she's coming home after these kind of battles and fights, essentially, and clothes are sitting here. I'm like, this is such a low level task compared to everything that she's doing. So I was very committed to my side of things, right? Well, I'm going to make sure things get cleaned and that they get dried.
Yes.
But I said, how can I take it to another level? So I decided, you know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to take our clothes to the wash and fold so that way they could wash them and fold them.
Okay.
And then that way I could just put them away because I'm a little stubborn. Okay. So I'm not going to fold the clothes, but at least she didn't have to fold them.
That's good.
And she appreciated when I would come in with these bags of clothes. And the funny thing is, just to button up this story, when I showed up to the and this was also another bad thing, right? So I'm this stubborn that the clothes were already clean and they were already dried, but because I didn't want to fold them, I took them all to the wash and fold. So they all got washed again.
Okay, Terrence.
Because they wouldn't just fold them. They was like, we have to wash and then we'll fold, but we're not just gonna fold. So so the lady thought that I got kicked out the house or something because I had these two big black garbage bags of laundry. She was like, "Oh, are you moving out or something?" And I was like, "Nah, don't worry about it. Just let me know how much it's going to cost." But essentially, that's how it went. But to me, that's like an example of trying to find a way, right? Because at the core of it, I think sometimes we look at compromise as us losing.
Yes.
But her being at a better place mentally and emotionally when she came in, to me, that even fed me. The appreciation that she had for it being done, even if it wasn't like it was. She didn't do jumping jacks and backflips or anything, but just the fact that wasn't something on her plate because of how much she's doing on the outside, that warmed my heart and it added value for me.
Yes. I'm going to tell you there's one word that describes this
Yeah.
situation
Yes.
that would support you in terms of what you were doing. You had to show empathy to your wife at that point, considering what she was doing on a daily basis and what she was coming home to. And yes, she may have committed to folding, but at that point, in that situation, she needed your empathy for what she was dealing with. And folding clothes was probably the last thing that was on her mind, even though she committed to that. But I like your solution. And I think your solution was an excellent one. But I think we all have to remember that we have to be empathetic.
Yeah.
And that is what sort of eases us through some of those small things.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Empathy for everybody.
Yes. Yes. For everybody.
Now, Dr. Glenn, what happens when your spouse, partner is not empathetic, but you're trying to bring empathy into the situation? How do we navigate that? Because it works well when both people are being empathetic, right?
It does. It does. I can't give a definitive response on that one, but I would say this, that we have to model the behavior. That's the best thing we can do. We have to model the behavior consistently for our partner or spouse to see that is what is expected in a relationship in order to get through those sort of difficult times or those, challenging little situations, those little small things. But that would be my response to that. That's a tough one, though. That's a tough one.
It is tough because I think we don't always talk about how to lead each other.
Yes.
In ways that enhance us or are hard places in our lives. We kind of act as if there's like this perfect person, like the way we're sold that dream as kids, where it's like you find your Prince Charming, or you find your princess, and you go into the, into Disney, into the magical kingdom and just live happily ever after. And that's not real life, right?
It's not.
And there's even like this perspective that like, hey, if I put all of myself out there and you choose me, then it's like you got me as I am. Like I'm not going to be, this is me being authentic.
Yes.
Authenticity, people will fight for that in relationships where you should be the safest, right? Yep. And to the point of change, one of the biggest things we have to be willing to do in relationship, which is an authentic commitment to love, a commitment to the covenant that you have if you are married, is the willingness to change for the sake of something bigger than yourself.
Yes.
Right? And I think I think that's something that we lack a lot of times in relationships is the commitment to the covenant. And sometimes the covenant isn't always defined in a certain way, right? Like covenants are it's a big word, right? And covenants are clear, but sometimes there are, I'll take a step back from the word covenant. Sometimes there are arrangements or agreements that don't always have clearly defined lines.
Yes.
And then when you have undefined lines over a long period of time, then you end up having conflicts that come from the gray areas. The black and the white is very clear. All right, we're not going here, we're not going here. But then it's like that blurry line gets a little bit broader. And it's like you just don't know how to navigate those different areas, right? And I just really believe that in relationship, it's healthy to create conversation when there is no issue, to learn the other person, to still pursue the other person. Like, regardless of who the other person is, what they do, how are you still pursuing to find out what's at the top of mind for them, without anything that you need? Just what's on your thoughts? What is causing you grief? What's causing you joy? What is your emotional capacity? How would you rate me on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of satisfying you as a person? Like, these types of questions give insight without it being a conflict, where it's like, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you like being negative, right?
Yes.
When things are perfectly fine, you had a great day. Hey, let's just talk about, let's take some assessment. Assessment is a powerful tool. If we haven't noticed, anything you do now, there's an assessment. I can make a call to order chicken wings, and I get a survey.
Yes.
How would you rate the service that you received today? Everybody wants to assess, but a lot of times we're not assessing in our relationships. And it's like, I believe empathy is really at the core of that, right?
Yes.
Like, to really want to know where the other person is. It can't come from your perception of the other person. Oh yeah, she likes this. He likes this.
Yes.
It's more about, what did they say that they appreciate, that they like, that they need, that they want. And that's able to change. It's not going to stay the same. Stop fighting to be right. Stop fighting to be right. And that's such a big one, because there's no room for, firstly, there's no room for a fight. And most times they'll say, I've heard this phrase as well. I'm dropping so many like cliche phrases in here. Do you want to be right? Or do you, oh no, did I mess it up? I did mess it up. It's do you want to be right? Or do you want to be happy?
Okay.
Right? And it's like, sometimes you can prioritize being right so much that the happiness of the relationship is at a deficit. And even if you win this particular argument, do you really win? You know, like, what do you win? What do you win? What is the booby prize?
Right. There's no prize. There's no prize.
Right. So stop fighting to be right. Communicate to win. That'll be the other side of it.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. So then the next one is, your lover is not your enemy.
You good with that one?
So you think about that. Your lover is not your enemy. You should be developing a relationship that is built on a commitment to one another, being able to listen to constructive feedback. Sometimes people don't want to hear feedback, and then they look at the other person like, my gosh, why are you treating me like that? Like, you're the bad guy. But you're just giving them some constructive feedback. And sometimes feedback doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. But it is done, if it's done out of love and a commitment to the relationship, it shouldn't feel that way. But the whole goal is, yes, your lover is not your enemy, and be open to some feedback and ideas that they share.
Nice. The next one is, never weaponize the children or in-laws between a spouse because you are hurt. That's a big one. That's a big one.
That is.
What happens when you're hurt? You end up creating more damage. It ends up being a gift that keeps on giving,
Yes.
right? And the antithesis of it, being pain. We don't want to overflow trauma to other generations. We don't want to create spaces where negativity is being spread. If there's something that happened that wasn't positive or didn't go the way you wanted to go, we're not saying try to hold it and harbor it yourself, right, but just never use the children, never use in-laws as a way to get back at someone else, because it's only going to cause more hurt, more harm, more trauma. And even if you were a victim before, now you're the victimizer.
That's right. Traditional roles don't always work for non-traditional people.
Yeah.
And we were having a discussion about this, and I was thinking about just in terms of the gender roles. I agree. And you shared a great example with, you were willing to, wash the clothes, but then, your wife said that she was willing to fold them. But I think that also sort of plays into, women that are making salaries, higher than their spouses. There's some men who would prefer to stay home and take care of the children versus working. So there's dynamics like that. Also, in terms of some non-traditional roles, I mean, just in terms of how people are in relationships now. A friend of mine, she was married, and her husband, they kept their houses. They said that, hey, we're going to keep our houses, but we'll just go back and forth between, each person's house. That's a non-traditional situation, and it was one that worked for them.
Yeah.
You know, they had a really happy relationship and marriage because of that. So yes, we have to consider that.
Nice.
Non-traditional roles.
Nice. The next one is understanding doesn't always align. And I'm going to kind of marry that with agree to disagree.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because
'Cause
I'm
it
just
does.
seeing it kind of like line up with each other.
Yes.
And understanding not always aligning, I think, is a healthy way to expect that even if you don't have mutual agreements,
Yes.
that you'll agree to honor and respect the other person's perspective.
Yes.
That it doesn't have to line up with yours in order for it to be right. It just may not be right for them, and what they believe may not be right for you. Mm-hmm. But how can we understand where the other person is and still move forward together?
Yes.
Right? And oftentimes there is so many opportunities to bridge and work together, even when we disagree.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the beauty of collaboration and community. I think we've heard so many times before about people who have like yes men around them, or someone who always goes along with everything.
Yes.
I even think of one of my favorite movies, Coming to America.
Oh, yes.
Coming to America is a classic.
Yes.
And Hakeem was not having it when the girl said, whatever you like, whatever you like. But sometimes we act like that's how our spouse is supposed to respond,
Yes.
right? Without having any opinion, without having any thoughts that are their own that may differ. And really, at the core of it, there's a challenge when somebody thinks of something differently than us, because sometimes there's a challenge to be changed, and there's sometimes a challenge to be a catalyst for change.
Yes.
And oftentimes we don't like that tension, but it's better for us, and it makes us better. And spaces where you are challenged are spaces where you also grow.
I agree. You made some really good points there that I'd like to just touch upon.
Please.
That when you do think about the conflict or challenges that you may encounter, it does go back to the point of being able to really evaluate your spouse or your partner and say, okay, here's what they're bringing to the table. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. Where can we really meet again in the middle? And we may have to compromise, but if we do compromise, we can see where it benefits this union. Because in the end, everything that you do in a relationship should benefit the union. And yes, you can agree to disagree, but still maintain that idea that this is going to be for the benefit of this union.
Yes.
And yes, I may not agree with the thought that you have, or I may have some different opinions, but I see your point of view. But let's come together in the middle here and make this union work. And I think that's what we're all striving to do. We're all striving to have healthy relationships.
I believe that. And if you're not, come talk to Dr. Glenn. She'll set you straight, right?
I don't know about that. I'm still learning.
Well, listen, today was such an amazing conversation. If you would have seen our notes, we could have kept going for another 2 hours for real. And I think this is probably something we should do again. But we're going to need your feedback to tell us if you liked it, if you loved it, what tips you got out of it. Send us an email. And I'm going to pass it over to you just for you to share the best ways to get in touch with you, any closing statements that you want to make.
Okay. They can reach me at cglenn@peirce.edu. Also, you can look me up on LinkedIn. Dr. C. Glenn is a way to connect with me. But we will be also facilitating our Level Up series on disruptive thinking on February the 22nd. We'd like to encourage you to come because that will be our part 2 of evaluating this whole idea and concept of disruptive thinking.
Yes. And you can reach me at tcjones1@peirce.edu. Once again, I will be in the building virtually for our Level Up series workshop later on this month on the 22nd. Looking forward to it. I think that's going to be at 6 p.m. If you have any questions or have any interest or any feedback from this or anything else that's been going on between the Level Up series or the Center for Male Engagement, please do not hesitate to contact us. I'm so thankful to you first, Dr. Glenn, for partnering on this. I think this was a great
It was fantastic.
opening podcast for us too as partners. And I really think that this is going to add a lot of value for a lot of people, and hopefully it just opens up a lot of conversations.
Yes.
Conversations, right?
Yes.
That are able to really enhance lives. So I'm going to close this out the way I do every Center for Male Engagement event. And when you reach a man, you reach a family. When you reach the family, you touch the community. When you touch the community, you can impact the city. And if you impact the city, you can change the world. Until next time.